welcome everybody again, and as I've said, I think every week, I want to thank you for showing up consistently and helping us try to get as much information out as possible, as much correct information out as possible, as we all know that it's been a very difficult time with misinformation and confusion. So once again, thank you. As you mentioned last week, we will be going now to, we will be doing these now only after a council meeting, so the next time I think it's July 7th for the next one, barring unforeseen circumstances. Obviously something happens, something of emergent comes along, but we're going to back off on these press conferences a little bit. I found it interesting that yesterday, June 15th, that the state of emergency, the provincial health emergency was allowed to lapse or was not renewed. And I'm going to go back to when this all started on day one, when I was and City Council was under immense pressure to declare a local state of emergency, and the absolute, the pressure was almost overwhelming for Council to follow along with the rest of the municipalities in Alberta, as they all, frankly, in my opinion, panicked and declared this local states of emergency for a non-local event. Obviously, it's a worldwide pandemic event. And I have to give credit to Merrick for his stoic response during all of this and his great advice during these difficult times, as that we were very moderate, controlled, and measured in our approaches, I think, as a municipality. So I'm very, very proud of what has occurred here, both with the citizens and the residents and my senior staff and my advisors, as what's happened. Now, just because that state of emergency has not been renewed, health emergency, does not mean, of course, as we all know, the virus is gone, that we can start not social distancing and not practicing washing our hands and those types of things. But it is nice, I think, to see some light at the end of the tunnel and to see that maybe we are going to get through this after all. I think that's all, and Merrick has just a couple updates, and then of course take questions about the council meeting last night, if there's anything, taxi bylaw maybe, I don't know, and we'll let Merrick go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Clugston. So yeah, fairly brief update today, and just want to reiterate kind of what Mayor Clugston has said. There's just saying thank you to everybody, and it's been a bit of an unusual time over the past 4 months, and given the fact that this is our last kind of regular update, media update over the next 2 weeks here, I wanted to kind of reflect on what's occurred over the past 4 months. So we've seen a bit of a wave of activity. So we quickly shut down. But now, given what occurred last week with stage 2 coming about earlier than expected, and some of those stage 3 items getting lumped into stage 2, we're quickly now reopening. So I think I had mentioned this numerous times so far, is we get the same information from the province as to reopenings the same time that the public gets it. So I remember even last week's press conference when I had mentioned there's going to be actually a release at 12:30, and I reflect on that, and it was a major release. I mean, we weren't expecting some of those items to get placed on there. Even personally, I was a little bit taken back by some of the items. It's good, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't expecting it personally. And so we understand the desire for the Family Leisure Center to be open, and to the wave pool to get opened, and all these outdoor pools and indoor pools to get open, and we understand it. Also, we do respect the public's appreciation for the patience that they've shown as well, because it is quite more difficult to actually open up than it is to shut down. And I'll repeat something that I had mentioned last night during open council, is there's really a 4-stage approach when we actually have to open something up, and given the fact that it's a pandemic, we've actually had to add another item on there, which is the sector-specific guidelines. So Alberta Health Services ultimately needs to tell us how to open. So what is the criteria that we need to follow to open? No different than it would be for your local gym or a restaurant for that matter. Is there are specific requirements that have to be followed, and we didn't actually get those until actually the third version came about, probably the day after, or the afternoon within the day after, so that would have been on the Wednesday. So we need those guidelines to actually be able to develop our plans. So that's really our phase 2 on there, or stage 2 is we need to develop the plans, which accounts for all of those items that are in the sector specific guidelines. And then the third one is we need to rehire all of our staff back. And so we didn't have all of our staff that were sitting around and just, within these recreational facilities, we had to make some difficult decisions. And that's where those temporary layoffs came in. And so we have to now rehire the staff back. And then we move into the fourth stage, which is really just, we need to make the facility functional. So this really comes about in three different phases as well, as we need to make the facility safe for our staff. We need to make the facility safe for the public, and ultimately we need to just make the facility functional from for what that building or facility is to be used for. And I'll just give an example of Family Leisure Center. Ultimately, we need to fill the pool. So we didn't have the pool circulating or the water circulating, we drained it. So it takes time to actually fill a pool. So I just want to go back to what I had mentioned at the beginning of this is we understand the desire and the need from the community to be able to open some of these facilities, but at the same time we also want to say thank you for the patience that has been exhibited from the public. Our hope here, desire within the next week here is to be able to provide a bit of a rough timeline on some of these ones, as we are aggressively working on these reopening plans. Ever since this came about last Tuesday, we set forth with this, looking at those sector-specific guidelines. This week it's going to our executive leadership team on reopening plans on this one. And so we understand the desire for all of these to open up, and we are aggressively working on it. Thank you very much. I'll leave it for questions now. So the question was with Echodale, and some of the, reopening plans announced are we looking at potentially holding back on that one, given the mass gathering restrictions? And that's an excellent scenario to actually give for this. What I had just spoken about is we still have requirements that we have to follow as a municipality. If we open up an outdoor pool or an indoor pool, we still need to follow the restrictions put in place by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Echodale presents a very unique circumstance because it's an open area. So it's not like an outdoor pool or an indoor pool where we can actually really closely control the number of people that are entering and exiting. So it presents just another complexity that we have to consider. And so this one, it will start looking at these items from the least complex to the most complex. So that's why we were able to open up the spray parks last week. Echodale presents a fairly complex environment. So yes, you're probably looking at one of the last ones to open. Just with even looking at the Family Leisure Center as well, it presents another complex environment. Yeah, what is taking the municipality, additional time on this one compared to the private sector? And I think an example was to the mall. And I'll just go back, and we have actually opened up facilities. And so City Hall presents a bit of a complex environment as well, given the fact that within the mall you can really control it, whereas we have a very open area here where it's a little bit more difficult to control. And also within the mall is you actually have storefronts as well, where that requirement is actually held to the business that's in the mall. And so the mall can open up, but there's other actual stores within the mall that actually haven't opened up. And so when it comes down to recreational facilities, I'll go back to what I had mentioned before, is we just learned about the sector-specific guidelines. We weren't actually planning for this until September to open up. That's what we were expecting for recreational facilities. So the question is, are we separating the indoor and outdoor pools? No, we're not. We're looking at everything as a whole with this. Yeah, so the question is, are we looking at, rehiring the temporary staff back as the relaunch strategy was announced there last week? And the example was provided around, we had our permanent staffs, or for example, a lifeguard that was mentioned, now they're cutting grass. Would we put them back and now hire those temporary staff back? And that's exactly what would occur, is we're in the process of moving those individuals back now, and then we have to rehire the temporary staff back on for the actual parks department.
So I believe my job is sometimes to bring perspective to things and remind people of what was going on. The day before WHO declared a pandemic, the number one story and the number one complaint I was receiving in social media was, Merrick Clugston, fix that road. And so it's interesting that you come back to that now, because during this time, we have got a deal with Box Springs Business Park to fix that road. Now, I have reiterated for the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years that it is not a city road. I've had some people say to me, just go in and pave it and send them the bill. Obviously, if I don't like your driveway, which is your private driveway, I'm not going to tear it up, fix it for you, and send you a bill. You have property rights. And so we have been working with them, and I am actually very happy to announce that that road is going to be redone. And there were and it's a very complex issue, from off-site levees to storm ponds to development progress, 90% completion rate. Obviously, the owners of Box Springs, we were hoping that they would sell out to that development in day one, and that was 13 years ago. So things take time. But yes, we're very happy to announce that the road will be paved. This is a private development and a privately paid for infrastructure. Now, once infrastructure meets a city minimum standard, it becomes the property of the city. But right now, because it doesn't meet a city standard, it is not city property. Because, obviously, every time you sell a piece of property, and commercial property is not like residential property where you can space, the spacing of each house. Commercial property may take half an acre, might take 10 acres, and may need 1 connection or 10 connections per acre. So you never know. And the problem is every time they sell a piece of property, they have to tear up the road, run in the water, it's shallow, and so that is why the road was left in the state it was, in the hopes that that development would sell it right away. But now that we've got a deal on that, I'm not sure if we're cost sharing or if there's something going on there. That's a good question. So go back to the year 2006 and 2007 when the city brought on new lots. We had to have a lottery. That's how quickly things were moving. You couldn't even buy a lot from the city. You had to get a number, and you basically took your choice of lots, and they sold out instantaneously. When that development was first conceived, and the economy was booming in 2006, 2007, 2004, 2005, when they probably started talking about it in their offices, they probably expected to sell out in a year or two. But then, of course, we all know what's happened, the 2008 financial crisis, COVID, and the oil price collapse as well. So nobody has a crystal ball, so I don't blame anybody on this.
Has it been handled well over the years?
I think as best it possibly can with not having a crystal ball. I remember, so I'll go back, and it was members of the public and the media said, no one will ever build anything out there. And so we said we put the event center. Well, that thing's going to be sitting in the middle of a field. And you could maybe argue that it is, but you've got a keg that we don't even qualify for. You've got the Skinnies. You've got Princess Auto, all the things that came post the event center. And then Aurora. I don't know. Is Aurora there because they wanted to be located close to where restaurants for their employees or close to an event center? So I think that things have gone as well as they possibly could given what's happened. I've just read a tiny little bit about that, and that the headline I read, and I don't know where it even came from because I read so much, is basically the residents of Alberta are warming up to a sales tax. But I haven't talked to the mayor of Lethbridge about that and AUMA about that. So yeah, that's brand new. It's relatively new.
Will you discuss it with your council here? Will you support a measure like that?
If it becomes an AUMA and it gathers legs, yes, we will.
But not before.
No. And I'm going to point out, and things in normalcy and in normal times, you know that the city of Edmonton is going to 21 days from grass cutting. Kids are actually mowing the parks so that they can play in the parks, and you're seeing what's going on here in Mesnat. We even mowed the paths. So Calgary, go back to pools, will not be opening pools this year at all. Yeah, we're talking about doing this thing. So we really, perspective again, that if you get some perspective, sometimes you need to leave Medicine Hat and then come back to see what's going on here. So I really think that we've handled this situation fairly well, considering what's going on in some places else.